does the president just get to say whatever he wants and we just have to say, we trust you? I think we live in a democracy. I think the American people deserve the right to ask questions, to demand evidence, to demand proof. And the reason they deserve that right is because they have been lied to before.
But do they?
And you can't just say, trust me, okay?
There is
you
no
can't
reason
just say,
to
trust me.
Do the American people have the right to tell the commander-in-chief how to wage what he perceives to be a war against the
They have
They
to
do.
ask.
No,
They
foreign
have-
policy
they're-
should not be dictated.
No, wait, hold on.
polling.
This is taxpayer dollars. This is
We're
our
paying for
money
this.
being spent on munitions to go.
John Fugelsang went on a primetime panel and refused to let the pro-war talking points go unchallenged, while Pete and others defended the Iran strikes and the secrecy surrounding them. John kept coming back to the same uncomfortable truth. You cannot tell the public this war was necessary to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon when the same team waging it is the one that tore up the deal that was keeping Iran from getting one. And right in the middle of it, Abby kept asking the question nobody up there wanted to answer directly. Why are people who ask legitimate questions about this war suddenly being called unpatriotic? Let's get into this, and I'll give you my complete thoughts on the other side.
Questioning Pete Hegseth and saying it's a quagmire. I don't know if we're there yet, but we're certainly at a place where when does this end? Even if the administration likes to play a creative game with the law and interpretation, I don't think we have an understanding of how this ends and when.
I mean, Pete, is it smart for them to say that anybody who criticizes what they're doing in Iran is unpatriotic? Is that a smart political strategy?
Well, there is a line between asking questions and oversight on the part of Congress and the legislative branch and these Democrat members of Congress calling it a quagmire, calling it a destructive and disastrous war, saying that it is a forever war. Within hours, within days of this conflict starting, they were already saying it was a forever war. So I understand Secretary Hegseth's frustration at some of the rhetoric that is being used. Questions can be genuine. They can get to the bottom of what's happening, but they're sitting there making it a partisan spectacle. And look, he's not perfect either. The Secretary of Defense got defensive and personal in some of his responses and lobbing barbs back across to the dais. But you know, I look at this and the polling also, Washington Post had a poll that showed 79% of Republicans said it was the right decision. So there's been all this talk about erosion among the Republican base, the MAGA base, but they still stand with President Trump. They believe it was the right decision. I would also point out that the very nature of conflict is opaque. That is just the way conflict goes. And there's a balancing act, but there's a balancing act between disclosure and concealment. And that is one that every administration has to balance. And so in some respects, the public, unless there is a full-fledged PR campaign, which there could have been, maybe should have been, but you also throw away the element of surprise.
Well, you'll remember with the Iraq
you
War,
also
President
harm
Bush
operational
went to the
security.
people and he asked, I mean, he laid out, even if you disagreed with the war in Iraq and why we went in for the mission set that we did, he still went and laid out the case to the American people.
Great.
Well, I mean, do you think it's turning out that great right now?
All that lead up time to prepare for an attack.
I don't think that was not the thing.
That was not the reason.
In this case, I do believe
that wasn't the thing that made the difference. The problem with those wars was that we weren't going to be able to rebuild.
The element of surprise is what we needed, and sometimes.
The people are certainly surprised by their gas prices.
I do think both conflicts, if there is any similarity between both conflicts, it's in that the objective, which in the case of Iraq was nation building, which could not be achieved, and the objective here, which in the case of Iran is sort of a rehabilitation of the nation, perhaps. They have no nuclear weapons, they stop funding terrorism. It's unclear if that's going to be achieved either. That's the only similarities between the two.
No, the greatest
things.
similarity is that both of these conflicts were built on lies. We had a functioning nuclear deal with Iran. Barack Obama is probably the first person to ever earn his Nobel Peace Prize a few years after he got it. But many nations came together to form this nuclear deal with Iran, and our military swore up and down for years that Iran was complying with the deal up until the moment Donald Trump tore it up. So if you're going to come out here and say we have to do this war because we can't let them get a nuke after this is the same team that tore up the deal keeping them from getting a nuke, they're essentially saying you have to believe our military was lying for years
you
when
want to
they
bet on that?
maintained.
You want to bet? What if you're wrong?
And
what if Iran is really, as the president indicated, on the verge of creating a shortcut to
Well, imagine the surprise of all the Republicans who believed him for years when he said no more wars, no more wars. He swore up and down Kamala Harris would do this. He would.
I think
it represents a
politically
lie.
saying no
And again,
more wars
is
advantageous, but
the
from
one
a government
thing-
No, it's a
perspective, it is the dumbest thing.
The one
campaign
thing
promise.
that, to answer Geraldo's question, I mean, we don't have a lot of actual hard evidence about about this one way or another. We do have the sworn congressional testimony of the Director of National Intelligence, who said that after we bombed their facilities last summer, they had made no efforts to reconstitute their nuclear program. Does the president just get to say whatever he wants and we just have to say, we trust you? I think the American people, we live in a democracy. I think the American people deserve the right to ask questions, to demand evidence, to demand proof. And the reason they deserve that right is because they have been lied to before.
But do they?
And you can't just say, trust me, okay?
There is
you
no
can't
reason
just say,
for
trust
adults
me.
Do the American people have the right to tell the commander-in-chief how to wage what he perceives to be a war against the
They have
military?
to ask.
No,
They
foreign
have-
policy
they're-
should not be dictated
No, wait,
on
hold on. This
polling.
is taxpayer dollars. This is
We're
our
paying
money
for this.
being spent on munitions to go and bomb Iran. Absolutely, I think the American people have a right to at least be explained why we're in this.
But we
And
also have a
it's-
right to free speech and to petition the government for redress of grievances, and there is no reason for anyone to believe anything these men say ever.
And it's also
they have
the
lied
government's
so
right to
much in the
withhold
course of
information
this
in the interest of
conflict.
national
Trump has
security.
already come out and said he wants the oil. There is no reason to take them at face value. And Abby, you're one of the best cable news hosts in the world. You're brilliant. You're so great at this. But I would never hire you to a cabinet position overseeing the Pentagon. And you're a good cable news host.
Thank you.
Let's start with the number that should be keeping this administration up at night, because the polling does not lie, even when the messaging does. Only 25% of Americans say this war has been worth it. Not 30, not 40, 25. And among Republicans, the people who are supposed to be the loyal base for everything this president does, support barely clears 58%. When you cannot hold 60% of your own side for a conflict you personally launched, that is not a soft patch. That is a structural collapse of the case you made to the public. And the reason for that collapse is exactly what the panel identified. The administration never properly laid out the case for this war before it started. No congressional authorization, no sustained public argument, no clear mission statement explaining what success would look like, when it would be achieved, and what the exit looked like. Asking those questions is not opposition. It is the basic minimum a democracy requires before committing its citizens' money and lives to military action. The fact that asking those questions got labeled as unpatriotic by Secretary Hegseth tells you everything about how weak the underlying case was. When you cannot win the argument on the merits, you attack the people making the arguments. That is the oldest deflection in the book. Then John Fugelsang made the point that should anchor every conversation about this war going forward. A functioning nuclear deal existed. Many nations were part of it. And the United States military and intelligence community confirmed for years that Iran was complying with the terms of that deal, right up until the moment Donald Trump tore it up. That is the documented timeline. IAEA inspectors on the ground, regular compliance reports, congressional testimony confirming it, and then Trump exited the deal, reimposed sanctions, and Iran, no longer constrained by the agreement, began enriching uranium to levels it had never reached while the deal was in force. So here is the corner John backed them into, and it is a tight one. If you are going to stand up now and say we had to go to war because we could not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon, but you are the same team that dismantled the mechanism that was keeping them from getting one, you are essentially asking the American public to believe that the U.S. military and intelligence community were wrong for years when they said Iran was complying. You cannot have it both ways. Either the deal was working, in which case tearing it up created the crisis that justified the war, or our own military and intelligence agencies were lying for years. Those are the only two options, and neither one of them makes the case for the current strategy. And then John cited something that deserves more attention than it got in the panel. He pointed to sworn congressional testimony from the Director of National Intelligence, stating that after last summer's strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, Iran had made no efforts to reconstitute its nuclear program under oath from the intelligence community itself. If that testimony holds up, then the urgent threat narrative the public was sold does not line up with what the government's own officials were saying on the record. You cannot present escalation as a necessity and then have your own intelligence director testify to something that undercuts the urgency. The comparison to the Iraq War is relevant here, not to relitigate it, but to establish a standard. Whatever you thought of that war, the Bush administration made its case publicly. It went to Congress. It went to the United Nations. It made arguments. You could agree or disagree with them, but they were made. That standard was not met here, and Abbey was right to hold the administration to it. The accountability argument John made at the end is the most important one. The American people have the right to demand evidence. They have the right to demand proof. They have the right to ask why before their money and their military are committed to action. Not because they want the enemy to win, not because they are rooting against the country, but because they have been lied to before, and because, trust me, is not an answer in a democracy. It has never been, and it should never be. The people asking for your silence and your trust are the same people who could not hold their own base, who never made their case to the public in advance, and whose own sworn testimony is being used to question them out. Justification for the conflict. Asking questions about that is not betrayal. It is the most patriotic thing a citizen in a democracy can do. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification. I'll see you in the next one.